Hi, my name's Matt and I'd like to welcome you to this Zinniac video on understanding service consumers and their needs. This is part of the Explore step in our ITIL specialist course, Drive Stakeholder Value. So before a service consumer can completely understand and articulate its needs for a service, the organisation's purpose and any influencing external and internal factors must be understood. The Golden Circle by Sinek asks the questions what, how and why, and these are the questions that help us as an organisation understand our needs for a service. So the what question is what every organisation knows that they do, what they do. So it's what do we do? The how question is how do we do it? And some organisations know and some people in the organisation know, but sometimes organisations as a whole don't know because they kind of segmented things into processes and they link and they don't actually understand the whole customer journey or the whole value proposition from end to end. But some do. And then why do we do it? Why do we do it that way rather than a different way? And as it says on the slide, few organisations know why they do what they do. Why is the purpose, cause or belief the reason it exists? So why does the organisation exist? That's very much around its vision and mission and what it's trying to do. Beyond, if you're a commercial organisation, so you exist to increase shareholder values. Shareholders are invested in you, their money, and you're trying to increase their value. But beyond that, what we're trying to do. So understanding those questions help us understand the need for the service, because obviously if we understand why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it, then we're trying to improve. Generally, if we're going to buy a service, we're looking to improve something, so it helps us focus down on our needs. So we need to understand external factors, and that's a prerequisite for a successful strategy, is to understand the context of an organisation, including the markets, customers and other stakeholders. And to explore that, we can use the PESTLE analysis. And if you're not new to it, well, you'll have come across PESTLE before, because if you're doing this course, you'll have done ITIL Foundation. And so if you did any version 3 or just about any other Axelos product, virtually every Axelos product talks about PESTLE. And it's an acronym that stands for Political, Economics, Sociological, Technological, Legal and Environmental Factors. And it's just a checklist. It's literally just a checklist that we go down and say, okay, what political factors could influence this? What economic factors could influence this activity or our strategy, our organisation? That's the context within which we work. A PESTLE analysis helps service consumers to identify opportunities and constraints. By understanding the external factors, the organisation can better leverage opportunities and mitigate threats. We also need to look at internal factors. The objective should be to gain a common understanding of the current situation and to establish a baseline. And it is important whenever we are looking to make a change, whenever we're looking to make an improvement of any type in business or personal life or whatever, is that we establish a baseline. We take a measure and establish a baseline of where we're starting from. If we don't do that, we've no way of knowing if we've improved. So very simple examples. If I like to run, went out for a run this morning, and before I started running, or when I started running quite early on, with my running, I started to time my run, so I knew how quickly I was running, how far I was running, and that that's my baseline. So I know where I've come from, and periodically I can effectively set new baselines, maybe at the start of a year or just come back from an injury. So I've kind of set a new baseline of where I was when I started again from injury. So I'm not where I was before the injury, but I'm improving from where I was when I first came back. So whatever you're doing, set that baseline. That's the first thing. The result of this assessment can be a baseline report that highlights developments and improvements. The 4 dimensions of service management should be assessed in order to understand internal factors. So we always want to look at those 4 dimensions, including, so obviously one of the 4 dimensions is partners and suppliers, but it's still the internal factors in terms of how the partners and suppliers, how closely we work with them, how it affects us. There are several methods that can be used to assess internal factors and establish a baseline, including interviews, workshops, surveys, and questionnaires, and any other method you want to use, really. Some, such as external maturity or capability assessments, are more formal and time-consuming than others. And yes, ITIL produces an ITIL maturity model. They kind of produce 2. So there's the one you have to pay for and the one that's free. So the one that's free is effectively a list of the practices and a description that describes what a 1 is, and a 2 is, a 3 is, a 4 is, 5, whereas 5 is very mature and 1's very immature. So it lets you score each ITIL practice on a scale of 1 to 5, enables you to do that more easily. And the one you have to pay for, you have to be an accredited consulting organisation to get access to it, and it's the same thing but just with more detail on it, a lot more detail. So my recommendation is always start off on the basic free one, do it yourself, and when you kind of get to a point where you've gone round the improvement loop a few times, then, and maybe you're starting to plateau in terms of improvement, then maybe bring in an external consultant and have them look at it and help you improve further. SWOT analysis, I'm sure you've at least heard of SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Again, a very common tool just across business, really, not particularly related to ITIL, but it's certainly something we can use. Understanding what our strengths are. Obviously, we want to use those in the market. If you follow Sun Tzu and the Art of War, if you've got enough strength, you don't need tactics. You can just attack. If you've got those strengths. So definitely understanding the strengths is good, but understanding your weaknesses as well, and can we mitigate them, or it says there, manage them or turn them into strengths. I mean, certainly if we've got a weakness, we might try and overcome it and address it. Occasionally, a weakness in one market might be a strength in another, possibly. I guess if you were in retail and you might have a weakness was, well, we don't have many shops. We only got, say, 10 outlets and our competitors have got 200. So that would be a weakness. Turn it into a strength might be, yeah, but if we go online and all our business goes online, we potentially have to close 10 shops, whereas our competitor would have to close 200. So in that sense, it could be a strength, possibly. And then opportunities and threats really are different types of risks. So threats are things that might happen. Opportunities are things that might happen. There's uncertainty around them, which is risk. And threats are things that might happen that are going to be negative for us, and opportunities are things that might happen that are going to be positive for us. And obviously, we want to try to increase the likelihood that the opportunities will happen, and if they do, that the positive effect is as great as possible. And for the threats, we want to try to avoid them if we can, or avoid them happening, prevent them happening. but if they do, minimise the negative impact. So if they do happen, because some things we have no control over, they will happen or they won't. Say raining, yes, I'm going out for a run, it may rain. I have no control over that. There's no way I can possibly stop it raining. I can choose not to go out for a run, but I want to go out for that you do always have that option of avoiding a threat by not participating in the activity. I want to go out for a run, so I can't stop it raining, but I can mitigate the rain. I can choose to wear waterproofs of some description if I want to. That might mitigate it. So SWOT analysis, useful and often as it's combined with internal and external assessments, and used to evaluate whether a service is needed and whether it should be provided internally or not. When a service consumer understands its overall needs for a service, it can then convert these into service objectives and explore opportunities. And ITIL provides the continual improvement model, and it may be a useful way to do this. And you can see on the slide there, we've got the now 7 steps of the continual improvement model. I was hesitant. It used to be 6 in ITIL version 3. We obviously didn't have the, very annoyingly to me at least, they didn't have the take action step. I think it's because all the others are questions and they wanted to keep them all as questions, so they kind of had take action embedded in how do we get there, whereas they've taken it out now as a separate step, which I think makes much more sense. So you could use it. I won't read all the activities to understand and needs, but you could use that. It's a way of going round and understanding how we can improve and deliver a service and look at different ways. And as I mentioned when we were talking about SWOT, with opportunities and threats, risks and mitigation, risk assessment is a key part of the explore step. So the assessment should include the potential impact of all relevant aspects on the current and desired situation. So that would be positive and negative. The optimal opportunities for services should be explored further to ensure that any residual risks are either mitigated or accepted. So that is if we're the consumer, we're buying a service and we're buying the service so that we get the outcome we want without having to manage the specific costs and risks, but there will be some risks introduced by the service and there'll be some residual risk left as well. So we need to make sure we're happy with that situation. If we're the provider, as I said before, we're obviously taking on risks of the service consumer and we need to be happy with that. So the example scenario on the slide is an organisation has a legacy system affected by an increasing number of security issues. That's the issue we have. And mitigation options. So continue using the old service, that's just, we'll accept it. We'll accept the risks that basically we might get hacked or we might have an information security leak. Or we can continue with the old service but implement some measures for improved security. So we're trying to mitigate it, we're trying to reduce the likelihood of a negative impact. We can develop and provide a new service to replace the old one internally. So we're mitigating, we're removing the risk of the old system, putting a new system in, but potentially there's problems in the new system, or how good's our security, how secure can we build a new system ourselves, against the fourth option, which is establish an agreement with the service provider to provide a new replacement service. So very much there, the balance is almost certainly we're not just going to continue using the old service, or not for very long, though we will for a period of time, but do we try and enhance the security on the old system, buy a new system or build a new system ourselves, and looking at the relative costs against the increased security and potentially the other benefits. So Classic example being Y2K. So coming up to Y2K, there weren't particularly security risks highlighted at that point in time, but many systems had a problem with the year 2000 where, because of the way they handled dates, they weren't going to work on the 1st of January year 2000. So organisations had this sort of scenario: do we just carry on using it up to the end of the year 2000, then we stop? If it breaks down, we'll just forget about it. Or do we try and fix it? Do we go through all the code, fixing the date problem? Or do we build a replacement ourselves, or do we buy one? And many organisations bought replacement, often from Oracle or SAP. They did very well out of it. But part of the justification was not just, well, it's not just going to fix the year 2000, the Y2K problem, the Millennium Bug, but it's going to give us more benefits. The new system, it does all these things the old system doesn't do. And yes, it is. We need to look at those as well. So that brings us to the end of this video on understanding service consumers and their needs. Please join me in the next video where we're going to look at understanding service providers and their offers. Until you see me again, have a great day.